Chapter 1. I woke up to a world I thought I'd left behind, except it wasn't the same. It was a strange sort of deja vu, where everything looked familiar, but felt just a little off. My bed, the soft sunlight filtering through the curtains, the distant sound of birds chirping. Nothing had changed, but I had. For a moment, I just stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what was happening. My chest still ached as if the memories of my death were lingering, but there was no wound, no coldness. I wasn't dead. I had been reborn. I sat up slowly, running a hand through my disheveled hair. This wasn't a dream. I could feel the warmth of my skin, the slight ache in my joints from lying down too long. My heart was beating steadily in my chest. And my breath came and went in the same rhythm it had before, back when I thought it was all over. I had been killed, betrayed, and locked away. The man who had once been my trusted companion, Marcus Drelon, had stabbed me in the back, quite literally. I had been forced into a life I never wanted, and when I had no more use to him, he took my life. But here I was, back in my old room, back to a time before everything went wrong. A second chance at life. And this time, I would do things differently. Okay, let's take a deep breath and figure this out, I muttered to myself, rolling out of bed. My name was Elena Grayshaw. I was Elena, and I was alive. I crossed the room and gazed at my reflection in the mirror. Same face, same eyes, but the fire within me burned brighter. The person who died was someone else. That version of me was gone. Now I had a chance to be stronger, smarter, and more independent. I wouldn't let Marcus control me again. This time, I would stay one step ahead. He would not get away with what he did. I would make sure of it. There was also King Aldrich, a man who seemed to hold his own secrets, his own power. Though I didn't know it yet, he would play a part in the changes that lay ahead. But for now, I needed to focus on myself. I had been given a second chance at life. I wasn't about to squander it. Chapter 2. The morning sun bathed the room in a warm, golden glow as I stood by the window, staring out at the sprawling gardens below. The world outside was peaceful, so much more peaceful than it had been in my past life. Back then, I had lived in a constant state of dread, knowing that at any moment, Marcus Drelon would come knocking, ready to force me into submission once again. But not anymore. I was Elena Grayshaw, and I had a second chance at life. I could hear the faint clatter of servants outside my door as they went about their duties, but today, I felt none of the usual anxiety that had gripped me in my past life. I wasn't trapped. Not this time. I would avoid Marcus at all costs. I had learned from my previous mistakes. I had trusted him once, believed he cared for me, but he had turned on me the moment he had no more use for me. He had locked me up, killed me, and betrayed me in the most horrible way possible, all so he could marry a peasant girl. His plans had shattered my world, but they wouldn't shatter this life. Not if I could help it. I straightened my back, determination flooding my chest. Marcus wouldn't get away with it again. Not this time. I took a deep breath and glanced around the room. I had everything I needed, my freedom, my wits, and a second chance. It was time to make my move. The next time Marcus came to me, I would not be the helpless woman he had once known. I would not be the one who cowered in fear or waited for him to dictate my future. No, this time I would turn the tables. I would outsmart him, and I would enjoy watching him squirm, but first I needed to be prepared. I couldn't just wait around for him to show up. I had to make my presence known, to take control of my life. I would start by carving out a path that didn't lead to him. No more rooms full of servants waiting for his orders. No more being treated like a prize to be won. I was my own person, and I would decide what happened next, but there was something else I had to consider. A man I hadn't expected to meet so soon. King Aldrich. I had bumped into him literally in the gardens just a few days ago, and even though I hadn't meant to, I'd found myself intrigued. He had looked at me with a mix of curiosity and amusement, and for a moment, it almost felt like a strange, fleeting connection. Was I willing to entertain the idea of someone else in my life? Would I let myself get involved with someone again, especially someone like King Aldrich? I shook my head. It wasn't time for that. Marcus was my main concern right now, and once I had control of my situation, I could think about the future, For now, I had to stay focused. And that meant one thing: avoiding Marcus at all costs. I took one last look in the mirror, my reflection showing a woman who was ready to take control, ready to make her mark. "Let's do this," I whispered to myself. Chapter 3. I had spent the last few days avoiding Marcus and carefully navigating my old world, determined to keep him out of my life. Each day, I found new ways to stay out of his reach, taking long walks around the estate, spending time with the servants who had once been too afraid to speak freely in my presence. It felt liberating, like I had broken free of invisible chains. But it was also exhausting, constantly having to watch my back. On this particular day, I found myself walking through the royal gardens, my steps light and carefree. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air, and I reveled in the simplicity of the moment. The garden, with its neatly trimmed hedges and winding pathways, had always been a place of solace for me. But today, it seemed to hold something more, a strange anticipation. As I turned a corner, I nearly collided with someone, stumbling back in surprise. My eyes widened when I saw him, King Aldrich, standing before me with a bemused smile on his face. Well, what a surprise," he said, his voice warm but carrying an edge of amusement. "It seems we meet again, Lady Greyshaw." I blinked, still trying to collect myself. I hadn't expected to run into him here, of all places. The last time we had crossed paths, it had been nothing more than a fleeting encounter, a brief exchange as I'd hurried through the halls. But today felt different. His presence was commanding, as though the garden had suddenly transformed into a stage for us alone. "I didn't mean to intrude," I said, quickly smoothing down my dress. "I was simply enjoying the garden," he finished for me, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "I can't say I blame you. It's one of the few peaceful places in this palace." I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. I had to be careful with my words around him. King Aldrich was a man of power and mystery, and while I had no particular desire to get involved with him, I couldn't deny that there was something about him that intrigued me. "I suppose you're right," I finally said, giving him a polite smile. "The palace does have its fair share of noise." "Too much noise, in fact," he said with a chuckle. "But perhaps that's what comes with being a king." I nodded in agreement, though my mind was elsewhere. It wasn't just his title that intrigued me, it was the way he looked at me, as if he saw something more than just a woman passing through the gardens. "You seem distracted, Lady Greyshaw," he observed, his tone softer now. I snapped back to reality, offering a small smile. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." I was simply lost in thought. He studied me for a moment, his gaze steady and calculating. "It's rare to find someone so unbothered by the chaos of court life," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Most people wear their worries on their sleeves. But you seem different." I wasn't sure what to say to that. My life had been full of worries, full of fears, but I didn't want to burden him with my past. Especially not now. "I suppose I've just learned to take things one day at a time," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. King Aldrich tilted his head slightly, a curious smile playing at the corners of his lips. "One day at a time. Interesting philosophy." Before I could respond, a servant appeared, bowing low. "Your Majesty, Lady Greyshaw, there is a matter that requires your attention." I gave the servant a polite nod, but King Aldrich's eyes lingered on me for a moment longer, his smile still present but unreadable. "Another time. Then, Lady Greyshaw," he said, his voice quieter now. "Perhaps we'll speak again soon." I watched him walk away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. My heart raced, but I couldn't quite pinpoint why. King Aldrich had left me with more questions than answers. There was something in his gaze, something that unsettled me and yet made me want to know more, but that was a problem for another time. For now, I had to stay focused on the real threat, Marcus. Chapter 4. The days passed, and life at the palace slowly began to feel like a game of careful balance. Every step I took, every decision I made, was calculated. I had to avoid Marcus Drelon, who still lingered like a shadow in my past, while also remaining cautious of the king, King Aldrich, who seemed to have an uncanny ability to show up at the most unexpected moments. The more I tried to distance myself from Marcus, the more I felt his presence weighing on me. It wasn't just his lingering influence, it was his unwavering persistence. I had learned from the past, but it seemed he had also learned from his own mistakes. He knew how to keep me in his sights without making it obvious. I could feel his watchful eye, even when he wasn't around, but I wouldn't let him get to me. Not again. I spent my days quietly going about my routine, avoiding any direct confrontation with Marcus. But it was hard to keep up the charade. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of him in the halls, his cold eyes scanning the crowd. The more I dodged him, the more determined he seemed to become. But one afternoon, as I was walking through the palace gardens, I caught sight of something that gave me pause. Marcus was speaking with someone in hushed tones near the edge of the courtyard. The man he was talking to was unfamiliar, but the intensity of their exchange was unmistakable. Marcus's hand was tight on the man's shoulder, and his voice was low, almost threatening. "Are you sure she's still here?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with a dangerous edge. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. They were talking about me. I didn't know who this man was, but I knew that Marcus had no right to be plotting behind my back. I took a few careful steps back, my mind racing. Whatever Marcus had planned, it couldn't be good. I had to find out what was going on. I had to stay one step ahead of him, no matter the cost. I continued to back away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The last thing I needed was to be caught eavesdropping. But the moment I turned to leave, I bumped into someone again. Lady Greyshaw. King Aldrich's voice was calm and measured, though his eyes held a trace of amusement. I blinked, startled, my heart still racing from the close call. "Your Majesty," I said quickly, trying to regain my composure. "I didn't see you there." "I can see that," he replied with a smile. "You seem quite preoccupied. Everything all right?" I hesitated. The last thing I needed was to be caught up in another conversation with King Aldrich while I was trying to keep my distance from Marcus's schemes. But there was something about his presence that made me feel oddly safe. "I'm fine, Your Majesty," I said, forcing a smile. "Just taking a walk to clear my thoughts." He regarded me for a moment, then nodded, his gaze lingering on me longer than necessary. "I see. If you ever need someone to talk to, you know where to find me." I wasn't sure what to make of his offer. King Aldrich was kind, but there was something more in his words. Something that felt personal. I wasn't sure if he was just being polite or if there was something deeper at play. Either way, I had no intention of confiding in him. I had my own battles to fight, and they didn't involve him. "Thank you, Your Majesty," I said, nodding politely. "But I'm quite all right." With that, I excused myself, quickly walking away before he could say anything more. But as I rounded a corner, I could feel the weight of his gaze on my back. It was unsettling, but I couldn't let myself be distracted. I had bigger concerns. Marcus was up to something, and I needed to know what it was before it was too late. Chapter 5. The next few days were filled with quiet tension, the kind that clung to the air like an invisible fog. I kept to myself, doing everything in my power to avoid Marcus and keeping a close eye on his movements. Every so often, I'd catch sight of him, usually in the company of someone shady, always speaking in hushed tones, his expression darker than usual. But despite my efforts to keep a low profile, it seemed that fate had other plans. It was late in the afternoon when I found myself walking through one of the palace's grand halls, a path I hadn't taken before. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors, each with eyes that seemed to follow me. I was deep in thought, wondering how long I could maintain this delicate dance with Marcus, when I heard a voice that made me freeze. "Elena." I turned sharply, heart thudding in my chest. Standing at the end of the corridor was Marcus Draylon, his presence as commanding as ever. He was alone, which immediately set off a warning bell in my mind. He never came alone, not unless he had something to say. "Marcus," I said, forcing my voice to sound calm, even as my insides twisted. "What do you want?" He stepped forward, his smile all sharp edges. "Oh, nothing much. Just wanted to see how you were holding up. We wouldn't want you getting too comfortable in that little corner of the palace, now would we?" His words were coated in a sweetness that only made my skin crawl. I couldn't let him get to me. I had to stand my ground. "I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Is that all?" He cocked his head, studying me with a gaze that felt like 1,000 knives probing at my soul. "Well, there's one thing you should know. There's a little plan of mine in the works, and I wanted to give you a heads up." My heart skipped a beat. What was he planning? I forced myself to stay calm, but inside, I was panicking. "A plan?" I asked, trying to play it off like I didn't care. "Yes," he said, his eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "A plan that will ensure your future is exactly as it should be. It's time for you to finally understand your place." I bristled, but before I could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made Marcus pause. His gaze flickered toward the hallway, his eyes narrowing. A look of mild annoyance crossed his face, but before I could make any move to escape, he took a step closer to me. "I suggest you stay in line, Elena," he whispered, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "I don't want to have to remind you of what happens when people disappoint me." With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving me standing there, my breath shaky, but my resolve stronger than ever. I waited until I was sure he was gone before I let out a sigh of relief. But the weight of his words stayed with me. Whatever plan he had, it wasn't good. And if I didn't do something soon, I might not be able to stop it. I needed answers, and fast. I spent the next few hours scouring the palace for any clue about Marcus's plans. But everything I found seemed to lead me in circles. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a dusty old bookshelf in one of the quieter corners of the palace that I found something worth noting. A letter, half hidden behind a stack of old books. The seal on the envelope was familiar, but it wasn't one I had seen in a long time. I broke the seal carefully and unfolded the letter. The words inside were short but to the point. The marriage contract is in place. The king will be forced to choose a bride. Let's ensure she's the one he picks. If not, we'll take matters into our own hands. I froze. The king, the bride. This was more than just a simple political game. This was about manipulating the throne itself. It didn't take long to realize that Marcus was no longer just a threat to me. He was playing a much larger game, one that involved the future of the kingdom. And somehow, I was right in the middle of it. I had to figure out how to stop him. But more importantly, I had to find out what King Aldrich knew about this. Chapter 7, if you've never tried sneaking around a palace in a fake mustache and a hooded cloak 2 sizes too big, don't. It itches, it shifts, and people still recognize you if you dramatically trip over your own feet, which I did. Twice. Are you trying to look suspicious? King Aldrich whispered beside me, not bothering to hide his amusement. "I'm blending in," I hissed. "Like a shadow. A graceful shadow. You're wearing lavender slippers. They're stealthy." I whispered louder. Our brilliant plan, his idea, my chaos, was to attend the noble matchmaking ceremony, aka the Royal Bride Parade, where Marcus Draylon was likely to make his next move. According to court gossip, he'd arranged for a mysterious noblewoman, me, in another universe, to suddenly gain favor with the king, thereby securing the throne through love. Or manipulation. Mostly manipulation. Instead, I was in the rafters with a stale cheese bun and a pair of binoculars. Watching. Waiting. Accidentally kicking a pigeon. Below, nobles paraded their heavily perfumed daughters like livestock. The king, bless him, sat through it all with a regal blankness that said, "I'm listening," while his eyes screamed, "Please someone stab me with a salad fork." Then came the dramatic twist. Marcus stepped forward. He bowed. "Your Majesty, I humbly suggest Lady Elena Marwood as a match worthy of your attention." The entire hall turned silent. A few gasped. One old duke choked on a grape. Aldrich's brow lifted slightly. "Interesting. And where's Lady Elena?" That was my cue. My time to shine. My moment to sweep down from the rafters, throw off my cloak, and say something iconic like, "Nice try, villain." Instead, I sneezed. Loudly. Everyone looked up. That sounded like a pigeon, Marcus said slowly. It was definitely a pigeon, I called down, abandoning all hope. A lady-shaped pigeon. Don't worry about it. The king pinched the bridge of his nose. I leapt down, climbed awkwardly and slipped on my slipper, stood in front of the entire royal court in my fake mustache, and pointed at Marcus like a very determined squirrel. I am not marrying him. In fact, I would rather marry a cactus. A sharp one, covered in bees. Gasps. Laughter. Someone applauded. Marcus turned red. Aldrich turned amused. The palace turned chaotic. I had made my public refusal. Loudly. Dramatically. In front of everyone. And the best part, the king smiled at me like I'd just become his favorite circus act. Very well, he said smoothly. The lady has spoken. Let the games begin. Chapter 8. The next morning, I was summoned to the royal garden, where King Aldrich was standing among roses like a painting come to life, regal, stoic, and completely unaware that there was a bee hovering near his ear. You summoned me. Your Majesty? I said, trying not to smack the bee away in case it made things worse. He turned, the corner of his mouth twitching. Lady Elena, after yesterday's performance, we need a new strategy. Was it the mustache? I can grow a better one. He didn't dignify that with a response. Instead, he gestured for me to sit beside him on a bench that looked fancy, but was absolutely trying to murder my lower back. Marcus is furious. He's doubled his meetings with other nobles, and he's asking questions. Let me guess, why is she still breathing? How do I make the king disappear? Is poison still in fashion? Something like that. Aldrich gave me a sideways look. So, I propose we escalate. I narrowed my eyes. Define escalate. We pretend we're romantically involved. I blinked. Come again. We fake a relationship. Announce a courtship. Get tongues wagging and Marcus off balance. It will buy us time. I stared at him. So, your plan is to fake date me? Yes. While Marcus, a known control freak with homicidal hobbies, watches from the shadows. Exactly. Brilliant, I said flatly. Truly, what could go wrong? He smiled. Glad you agree. I opened my mouth to argue further, but then paused. Actually, this might work. It was risky, yes, but it would give me protection under the king's name and throw Marcus completely off his plotting game. Plus, I'd get to attend fancy events without having to awkwardly hide under tables. Fine, I said, standing. But I have conditions. Let's hear them. First, I get to design the narrative. Second, I want cake at every event. And third, you want cake. I work better with sugar. He chuckled. Deal. And just like that, I found myself in the most absurd situation of all. Fake dating the king to avoid becoming a dead ex-concubine. Within hours, the court buzzed like a nest of scandal-hungry bees. Whispers spread faster than wildfire. Did you hear? The king and Lady Elena. I always knew she had flair. She wore a mustache yesterday. Exactly. Such courage. As I watched the chaos unfold, I almost forgot the dangers still looming. Almost. But I reminded myself this was a game. One I intended to win, preferably with cake. Chapter 9. Let me begin by saying, I did not plan for it to happen like that 0.1 minute. I was trying to explain to King Aldrich that our fake relationship should remain strictly business. The next, I was being very much kissed against a bookshelf while a palace servant dropped a tray and screamed in the distance. T.O. be fair, Aldrich had that I'm tired of pretending glint in his eye for days now. It wasn't my fault he finally snapped. Or that I maybe accidentally kissed him back for a second too long, or 5. Okay, I gasped after breaking the kiss and gently pushing him back. That was unexpected. His eyes twinkled, lips curved in a maddening smirk. You kissed back. It was a reflex. Like when you fall and grab the person next to you. Are you saying I'm the emotional equivalent of a staircase railing? If the shoe fits, Your Majesty. A throat cleared behind us. We both turned to find the royal gossip goblin, aka Lady Mortina, court's biggest mouth, standing with wide eyes and a fan trembling in her gloved hand. No, I said immediately. Yes, Aldrich said at the same time. "We'll keep this quiet," I tried. "Oh, no we won't," she whispered gleefully before sprinting off like a particularly chatty ferret. I turned to Aldrich, horrified. "She's going to tell everyone." He looked far too amused. Let her. Let her. The more they believe we're madly in love, the less power Marcus has." I narrowed my eyes. "Was this your plan all along?" He didn't answer, just took my hand and said, "Come. If we must be in love, we should at least look convincing." "But we're not actually," he leaned in close. "Aren't we?" I sputtered. We attended that evening's banquet arm in arm, and the court exploded with scandalous joy. Whispers followed us like perfume. I gave my best innocent smile. He gave his best touch her and die, glare, by dessert. 3 nobles had fainted, and someone started composing a love poem about us. Later that night, I marched into Aldrich's study, arms crossed. "That can't happen again." He raised a brow. "What the poem?" "You know what I mean." He stepped closer. "You didn't seem to mind." I poked his chest. "We are pretending, remember?" He nodded slowly. "Of course. Just remind me next time." I get carried away. Next time, God's help me, I was in trouble, because deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted there to be a next time. Chapter 10, if there's one thing worse than being fake engaged to a king, it's being actually fond of him and still pretending you're not. Add a power-hungry noble with a murdery past to the mix, and things get spicy real fast. IT began with breakfast. I was just biting into a very fluffy croissant when Lady Mortina burst into the hall, red-faced and breathless. "The crown is missing." I blinked. "What crown?" "The royal crown. The one used for coronations and ceremonial brooding." "Brooding?" I asked, already stuffing the rest of the croissant in my mouth. King Aldrich strode in moments later, flanked by guards, and Mortina practically flung herself at him. "Your Majesty, we've searched the vault, gone. Vanished. Could it be misfiled?" I offered helpfully. "I once lost a cat for 3 days. He was under my bed, judging me." Aldrich rubbed his temples. "Lady Elena, you are not helping." "Wasn't trying to." Later, we learned that Marcus, in a truly dramatic move, had stolen the crown in a desperate attempt to frame Aldrich for corruption. Why? Because that's what you do when you're a sore loser and your fake concubine runs off to fake date the king. He had even left a note. "The people deserve a real ruler, not one who lets women in lavender slippers run the kingdom." Rude. Naturally, we found Marcus by lunchtime. He was hiding in a broom closet with the crown and 3 sandwiches. When cornered by guards, he screamed, "I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for that meddling girl." To which I responded, "And my slippers." With a smug huff, I took the crown and plopped it onto Aldrich's head. It was slightly askew, which made him look like a tired, mildly unhinged party guest. I liked it. The nobles cheered. The guards dragged Marcus away. Mortina wept tears of gossip, and just like that, the kingdom had its crown back. Later that night, Aldrich found me on the balcony, watching stars blink lazily overhead. "You did well," he said. "I always do," I replied, leaning on the railing. "Are you sure we're still pretending?" He paused. "Do you want to be?" I didn't answer, because for the first time in this ridiculous, chaotic second life, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted, except maybe another croissant and maybe him. Chapter 11. I'll admit, I was starting to get used to this whole royal life thing, minus the constant scheming, the backstabbing, and the awkward conversations about feelings. Today, however, was not one of those days. Today, I was being dragged by Aldrich to the most ridiculous event of the century, his birthday ball. Why was it ridiculous? Because Marcus, in a final act of utter chaos, had somehow convinced half the court that I was going to declare my love for him in front of everyone. Apparently, pretending to like a king was more confusing than I'd thought. The ballroom was a sea of opulence. Velvet drapes, sparkling chandeliers, people in far too much glitter, and a suspicious amount of cake. As if they knew my exact weakness. But instead of enjoying the festivities, I found myself hiding behind a column, watching as Marcus and his lackeys were, once again, trying to frame the situation in his favor. Why did he think I would suddenly declare my love for him now? Had he never heard the phrase, "Hell hath no fury like a woman who has to fake date"? I was about to leave and go raid the dessert table when Aldrich found me, looking far too calm for my nerves. "Lady Elena," he said, his voice barely a whisper as he approached. "We need to make this convincing." I thought we already did that. We kissed back. "I saved your crown. What's left?" I asked, eyes narrowing. "Declare your love for me." The sentence hung in the air, and I stared at him as if he had just asked me to juggle flaming swords. "Pardon." "Declare it publicly," he said, his lips twitching. "Right here, right now. Make Marcus lose whatever little composure he has left." I blinked. "And you're fine with this?" Aldrich's gaze softened, something behind his eyes that made my stomach do a weird flip. "Do you want to make this game real?" I stared at him for a long, heart-thumping moment before realizing. I didn't want to fake it anymore. "Not really. Fine," I said, stepping out from behind the column. "But if I do this, we're doing it right." I walked to the center of the ballroom, my heart pounding. The room went quiet, all eyes on me. I took a deep breath. "King Aldrich," I began, my voice steady. "I have something to say." Aldrich stood, looking at me with his ever-present calm. "I have been forced into many ridiculous situations," I continued, "but none of them have ever been quite as ridiculous as pretending to not feel what I feel now." Gasps. Whispers. I swear I heard someone drop their drink. "I declare," I said, locking eyes with the king, "that I knew it." Marcus screamed, suddenly rushing to the front, red in the face. "You were always in on it." "You too." I gave him a look that could freeze water. "Shut up, Marcus." The entire court was now thoroughly confused, but I didn't care. This moment was mine. "I declare," I repeated, louder, that I turned to Aldrich, who had that maddening grin on his face. "I think," I whispered, stepping closer, "that I may just like you more than I'm willing to admit." The room erupted into applause. I leaned into Aldrich and whispered, "Now, who's going to take me to the cake table?" He smirked, kissing me lightly on the cheek. "Lead the way, my queen." Epilogue. A year had passed since the ball, and I was now officially the queen of the kingdom. Not in the "I'm trapped in a palace and expected to smile through it all" kind of way, but in the "I'm the one who gets to eat the last slice of cake" kind of way. And honestly, I couldn't have asked for anything more. Marcus? He'd been exiled, which was a nice way of saying kicked out of the kingdom with nothing but his own miserable thoughts. Aldrich? Well, he was still Aldrich. But now, I didn't just put up with him, I was glad to have him by my side, and the best part? There was always cake. Thank you for listening to the story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chaotic moments and unexpected twists. And hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.